Alice Springs is one of the remotest major towns on Earth. We are a hell of a long way from anywhere, in the middle of a vast, barren expanse of murderous desert. But the strange thing is that when you're in the town itself, it doesn't feel like that at all. In many ways, it's like any small regional Australian city. You've got shopping centres, you've got a Woolworths to the left, a Coles to the right, all the big four banks have branches here. You've got McDonald's, KFC, Toyota dealerships, Volkswagen dealerships, and every possible modern convenience, says me who almost pulled out in front of that Corolla. Sorry, mate. Okay, the landscape around town is definitely unique when compared to other parts of Australia. You don't have to travel far to see red mountains and spinifex grass and dry creeks. But the reality of it is that if you live here, it's no more difficult to stay here than it would be in, say, Dubbo or Shepparton or Rockhampton. You only really start to notice just how remote Alice Springs is when you try to leave it, because we are a very, very long way away from anywhere else. Long story short, if you want to go to another city from Alice, you have precisely two options. You have Adelaide, which is that way to the south, and you have Darwin, which is to the north. It's near as makes no difference, 1,500 kilometres to either one. 1,500. The nearest major town is Mount Isa, which is 1,100 kilometres away. Then you have Port Augusta, which is 1,200 kilometres away. The nearest place with more than 1,000 people living in it is Tennant Creek, 500 kilometres to the north. But like I said, you can't really tell that from in here. So yeah, on the ground it's pretty much like any other town in Australia. You even have young fellas on clapped out Ninja 250s that can't quite make it up Anzac Hill. There is no denying though, this place is a hell of a long way from anywhere. Alright, let's go talk about the MacDonnell Ranges. The MacDonnell Ranges are the mountains you could see in the drone footage. They run pretty much the entire width of the Northern Territory across the southern part of the state, from the Queensland border to the WA border. A lot of people believe that Alice Springs is really flat and featureless, but it's quite the opposite. It is very mountainous. The tallest point is Mount Gillen, which I think is something like 900 metres above sea level. That's another thing people don't realise about Alice, is that all of it is at a pretty significant altitude. It averages about 550 to 600 metres. Oh, brilliant job, mate. Well done. Okay, Anyway, because of that altitude, in winter it can get unbelievably bloody cold here. In the 3 years I spent living here, I have on a couple occasions seen it go to -5 and below. Summer, of course, is unbelievably hot, and days well above 40 degrees are common. It's autumn at the moment and it's a relatively cool 32. The MacDonald Ranges are characterised by a series of gaps. These gaps have been carved out by rivers over the course of millions and hundreds of millions of years. And this is one right now. This is Heavitree Gap. That's the Todd River, which carved out this gap. This is naturally occurring, and it is pretty much the only way into town. So you've got the river, the road and the railway tracks all going through here. I'm going to take you to see another one though, a little bit outside of town, called Emily Gap, which has something really cool I want to show you. We're about to cross the Todd River here. As you can see, the road just got built straight across it, and when this river is in flood, which doesn't happen often, you're not going to be able to get across here. Okay, we're about 10 k's out of town, and this is Emily Gap, which has something I want to show you. Assuming I don't stack it in this gravel road. I wanted to actually show you some Aboriginal rock art that's painted in the walls a little bit further up the gorge, but as you can see, it's filled with water, which is cool in itself, because in the 3 years plus that I lived here, I never once saw this place with water in it. So that's amazing. There's even people swimming down there. That water is what made this gap. Over the course of hundreds of millions of years, the MacDonald Ranges are estimated to be about 350, 400 million years old. They've been here a long time, and it obviously took the water a long time to cut that gap. What a fantastic place. The mountains are that red sandstone that typifies this part of the world so much. That was really cool to be able to see that with water in it. Anyway, onwards to one of my personal favourite places in Alice. So let's get back in the bike and go there. There are gaps like that through the MacDonald Ranges throughout their entire length. There's another one just a couple of kilometres further out the road there called Jessie Gap. I've been to a good few of them in my time here, and most of them, if not all of them, are well worth your time if you're in the area. I particularly recommend Stanley's Chasm. I would go out there, but I've done over 3,000 kilometres on the bike in the last week, and I'm not going far today. Anyway, onwards to Ilparpa Road. So this is Ilparpa Road, which is one of my favourite places in Alice Springs. Firstly, you have the clay pans down here, which are dry for much of the year, but when you do get rains, they fill up. And all I'll say about them is that it's my dog's favourite place in the world. Just approaching the entrance now. So as I said, I'm going to park up, let the drone do the legwork, and that way I won't have to pick a 300 kilogram bike up. Yeah, I'll just park here. Excellent. and they appeared to be bone dry. That's the thing about the rainfall here, it's so erratic. It means that one place 12 kilometers away from another might be in flood, and the other one might be bone bloody dry. Seems to be the case here. I had to double check on the app I have that tells me where it's legal for me to fly my drone, because we're near the Pine Gap Joint Defence Facility, which is one of Alice Springs' most notorious institutions, shall we say. It's just over the hills on the left hand side there. It was open in the 1970s, I think 1970 it was opened, and it's jointly run by the US and Australian governments. It has been the source of many protests and conspiracy theories over the years. These days what it is it's a communications monitoring station. It covers approximately 1/3 of the globe, including such, shall we say, geopolitically important areas such as China and North Korea. They have a massive array of satellite dishes nestled in behind those mountains there. The reason that it was built in Alice Springs was that it's really bloody far away from the sea, and that means that spy ships weren't able to intercept messages. A lot of the conspiracy theories that go along with the site are absolute nonsense, but one very interesting one that I enjoy involves former Australian Prime Minister Gough Whitlam. He was ousted from his job in 1975 by the Governor General John Kerr. Whitlam apparently had plans to have Pine Gap shut, and it's believed that that may have been a contributing factor to the Governor General ousting him. I'm not sure how true that is, but it's certainly an interesting theory. Also, Il Parpa Road is a bloody great road for riding a motorbike on, and it's pretty much where I learned how to take a corner. Back to Pine Gap. There's a large American population that live in Alice Springs. There's always a few hundred, even 1,000 or more here at any one time, between people working in the base and their families. It's quite funny though, because if you ask any American who lives in Alice Springs what they do for a living, they will usually say that they're a gardener or systems analyst, which means I'm in the CIA. It's believed to be the CIA and NSA that are responsible primarily for its operation. And we're just coming through another one of the gaps through the MacDonnell Ranges. This one is called Honeymoon Gap, and judging by the amount of people here, yes, there is water in it, and there is also a crap load of sand on the road, so I'll be taking my sweet ass time here. Seem to be having a barbecue over there. Nice. Anyway, let's go look at the Telegraph Station, which is basically where modern Alice Springs was born. I've absolutely no idea why the coppers are just at the side of the road here. Seem to be talking to that cyclist. Seems to be a tourist. Weird. In those hills to the left, by the way, is the Lara Pinta Trail, which is one of the world's great walking tracks. I have walked a couple of sections of it over the years. Some of it is pretty hardcore, and I wouldn't want to do it in summer, shall we say. But as a result, Alice Springs is a bit of a mecca to hardcore hikers. Another interesting little site in Alice Springs is just here. It's the grave of John Flynn, which is under that boulder on the top of that little hill there. And John Flynn is the man who founded the Royal Flying Doctors Service. Behind me is the Alice Springs Telegraph Station, which is basically where the modern town of Alice Springs began. It opened in 1872 as part of the Overland Telegraph Line, which was constructed between Adelaide and Darwin. The site was surveyed by a guy named William Mills, who ended up giving the modern town its name. He named the area Alice Springs after a woman named Alice Todd. Alice Todd was the wife of Sir Charles Todd, who was the head of constructing the Overland Telegraph Line. And this dry river you see in the shot here is called the Todd River in his honour, and that's the river that flows right through the Alice. I use the term flows loosely. The first postmaster was a German fella by the name of Muller, and he stayed in the job a couple of years and then went and got a position out in the gold mines in Arltunga over to the east of here. He ended up getting done for embezzlement, a total of $42, which was probably a fairly hefty amount back in the late 19th century. He ended up doing 6 months in jail in Port Augusta prison for his troubles. There's a street in Eastside named after him. The telegraph station closed in 1932 after a newer post office was opened in the town centre. Since then it has been used for a variety of different purposes. In the 30s and 40s it was used, and I quote here, as a home for half-caste children. So basically they would house and educate the children of Aboriginal people and white settlers. It was then used as an Aboriginal reserve until the 1970s, when it was more or less abandoned by the Aboriginal people who lived here as they all moved out to the community of Amungana outside town. These days, it is a rather lovely historical reserve with a nice cafe, and it is a very nice place to visit. They have a lot of really nice and quite interesting displays, and even a recreation of what the telegraph and post office would have looked like back in the late 1800s. It goes without saying that Mr. Wills was not the first person to establish any kind of a settlement here. This place has been inhabited for about 30,000 years. There's strong historical evidence to support that. The Aboriginal people whose lands it traditionally is are the Eastern Orente people. And I'm always amazed when I think about people surviving here for 30,000 years. It would take a much smarter man or woman than I to look at that scrubland, which is hot as hell and bone dry, and think, oh yeah, plenty of food and water here, will be grand. The fact that people have survived here for 30,000 years is one of the most underrated human achievements, if you ask me. We're just passing Alice Springs Hospital there on the right, where I spent 3 mostly enjoyable years working. One interesting little tidbit of information about it is that it has the largest dialysis unit in the southern hemisphere, which is a bit strange for a town of 26,000 people in the middle of nowhere. As it turns out, the indigenous people that live around here are particularly susceptible to various types of kidney ailment, hence the need for a massive renal dialysis unit. That's Todd Street Mall in front of us, and everything appears to be closed at the moment. I don't know whether that's because of the Rona getting rid of all the tourists, or whether they just close on Saturday afternoons. Couldn't tell you. Anyway, I have been on the road for a week now, most of it in places that one would describe as sparse, and I have had a bizarre hankering for something the entire time I've been away, so I'm going to go and scratch that itch now. Oh, those magical golden arches. I never claimed to be a classy or sophisticated individual, folks. Not once. Good luck.